This was indeed the highest standard for a moral life for an individual to follow. So high a standard of moral life was quite unknown to the Aryan society of his day. He did not stop merely with setting an example by leading a life of purity. He also wanted to mold the character of the ordinary men and women in society. For their guidance, he devised a form of baptism which was quite unknown to the Aryan society. The baptism consisted in the convert to Buddhism undertaking to observe certain moral precepts laid down by Buddha. These precepts are known as Panchshila or the 5 precepts. They are 1. Not to kill, 2. Not to steal, 3. Not to lie, 4. Not to unchaste, and 5. Not to drink intoxicants. These 5 precepts were of the laity. For the monks that were 5 additional precepts. 6. Not to eat at forbidden times. 7. Not to dance, sing, or attend theatrical or other spectacles. 8. To abstain from the use of garlands, scents, and ornaments. 9. To abstain from the use of high or broad beds. And 10. Never to receive money. These silas or precepts formed the moral code, which it was intended should regulate the thoughts and actions of men and women. Of these, the most important one was the precept not to kill. Buddha took care to make it clear that the precept did not merely mean abstention from taking life. He insisted that the precept must be understood to mean positive sympathy, goodwill, and love for everything that breathes. He gave the same positives and extended content to other precepts. One of the Buddha's lay followers once reported to him the teaching of a non-Buddha ascetic to the effect that the highest ideal consistent in the absence of evil deeds, evil words, evil thoughts, and evil life. The Buddha's comment upon this is significant. Inverted commas open. If, said he, this were true, then every suckling child would have attained the ideal of life. Life is knowledge of good and evil, and after that the exchange of evil deeds, words, thoughts, and life for good ones. This is to be brought about only by a long and determined effort of the will. Inverted commas close. Buddha's teachings were not merely negative, they are positive and constructive. Buddha was not satisfied with the man following his precepts. He insisted upon encouraging others to follow them. For example, in the Anguttara Nikaya, the Buddha is quoted as distinguishing between a good man and a very good man by saying that one who abstains from killing, stealing, unchastity, lying, and drunkenness may be called good, but only he deserves to be called very good who abstains from these evil things himself and also instigates others to do the like. As has been well said, the two cardinal virtues of Buddhism are love and wisdom. How deeply he inculcated the practice of love as a virtue is clear from his own words. Inverted commas open. As a mother at the risk of her life watches over her own child, her only child, so also let every one cultivate a boundless loving mind towards all beings, and let him cultivate good will towards all the world, a boundless loving mind above and below and across, unobstructed, without hatred, without enmity. This way of living is the best in the world. Inverted commas close. So taught Buddha. Inverted commas open. Universal pity, sympathy for all suffering beings, goodwill to every form of sentient life. These things characterized the Tathagata, Buddha, as they have few others of the sons of men, and he succeeded in a most surprising degree in handing on this point of view to his followers. Inverted commas close. Buddha led to the doctrine of wisdom as firmly as he did to the doctrine of love. He held that moral life began with knowledge and ended with wisdom. He came to save the world, and his method for the accomplishment of this end was the destruction of ignorance and dissemination of knowledge as to the true values of life and the wise way to live. Buddha did not arrogate to himself the power to save people. People had to do that for themselves, and the way to save lay through knowledge. So much insistence did he place upon knowledge that he did not think that morality without knowledge was virtue. There are three things against which Buddha carried on a great campaign. They repudiated the authority of the Vedas. Secondly, he denounced the yadana as a form of religion. The attitude of Buddha towards yadana is well stated in Jatak Amla in the form of a story. The story runs thus. The story of the sacrifice. Those whose hearts are pure do not act up to the enticement of the wicked. Knowing this, pure-heartedness is to be striven after. Long ago, the Bodhisattva, it is said, was a king who had obtained his kingdom in order of hereditary succession. He had received this state as the effect of his merit and ruled his realm in peace, not disturbed by any rival, his sovereignty being universally acknowledged. His country was free from any kind of annoyance, vexation or disaster, both his home relations and those with foreign countries being quite in every respect, and all his vassals obeyed his command. 1. This monarch, having subdued the passions, his enemies felt no inclination for such profits as are to be blamed when enjoyed, but was with his whole heart intent on promoting the happiness of his subjects. Holding virtuous practice, dharma, the only purpose of his action, he behaved like a muni. 2. For he knew the nature of mankind, that people set a high value on imitating the behavior of the highest. For this reason, being desirous of bringing about salvation for his subjects, he was particularly attached to due performance of his religious duties. 3rd, he practiced almsgiving, kept strictly the precepts of moral conduct, sila, cultivated forbearance, strove for the benefit of the creatures. His mild countenance being in accordance with his thoughts, devoted to the happiness of his subjects, he appeared like the embodied dharma. Now it once happened that, though protected by his arms, his realm, both in consequence of the faulty actions of its inhabitants and inadvertence on the part of the angels charged with care of rain, was afflicted in several districts by drought and the troublesome effects of such a disaster. Upon this, the king, fully convinced that his plague had been brought about by the violation of the righteousness by himself or his subjects, and taking much to heart the distress of his people, whose welfare was the constant object of his thoughts and cares, took the advice of men of acknowledged competence, who were reputed for their knowledge in matters of religion. So, keeping counsel with the elders among the Brahmins, headed by his family priest, Purohita, and his ministers, he asked them for some means of putting an end to that calamity. Now, they believing a Solomon's sacrifice, as is enjoined by the Veda to be a cause of abundant rain, explained to him that he must perform such a sacrifice of a frightful character, inasmuch as it requires the mass care of many hundreds of living beings. But after being informed of everything concerning such a slaughter as is prescribed for the sacrifice, his innate compassionateness forbade him to approve of their advice in his heart. Yet, out of civility, unwillingly to offend them by harsh words of refusal, he slipped over this point, turning the conversation upon other topics. They, on the other hand, no sooner caught the opportunity of conversing with the king on matters of religion, than they once more admonished him to accomplish the sacrifice, for they did not understand his deeply hidden mind. For, inverted commas open, you constantly take care not to neglect the proper time of performing your different royal duties, established for the sake of obtaining the possession of land and ruling it. The due order of these actions of yours is in agreement with the precepts of righteousness, dharma. 5. How then is this that you, in all other respects, are so clever in the observance of the triad of dharma, artha and kama, bearing your bow to defend the good of your people, are so careless and almost sluggish as to that bridge to the world of the devas, the name of which is sacrifice? 6. Like servants, the kings, revere your commands, thinking them to be the surest gauge of success. Now the time is come, O destroyer of your foes, to gather by means of sacrifice superior blessings, which are to procure for you a shining glory. 7, 8. Certainly, that holiness which is the requisite for a Dikshita is already yours, by reason of your habitual practice of charity and your strictness in observing the restraint of good conduct. Nevertheless, it would be fit for you to discharge your debt to the Devas by such sacrifices as are the subject matter of the Veda. The deities, being satisfied by duly and faultlessly performed sacrifice, honor the creatures in return by sending rain. Thus considering, take to mind the welfare of your subjects and on your own, and consent to the performance of a regular sacrifice which will enhance your glory. Thereupon he entered upon his thought, very badly guarded is my poor person indeed, being given in trust to such leaders. While faithfully believing and loving the law, I should uproot my virtue of tender-heartedness by reliance upon the words of others. For truly, 9. Those who are reputed among men to be the best refuge are the very persons who intend to do harm, borrowing their arguments from their law. Alas, such a man who follows the wrong path shown by them will soon find himself driven to straits, for he will be surrounded by evils. 10. What connections may there be, forsooth, between righteousness and injuring animals? How my residence in the world of the Devas or propitiation of the deities have anything to do with the murder of victims? 11 and 12. The animals slaughtered according to the rites with the prescribed prayers, as if those sacred formulas were so many darts to wound it, goes to heaven, they say, and with this object it is killed. In this way, that action is interpreted to be done according to the law. Yet, it is a lie. For how is it possible that in the next world one should reap the fruits of what has done by others? And by what reason will the sacrificial animal mount to heaven, though he has not abstained from wicked actions, though he has not devoted himself to the practice of good ones, simply because he has been killed in sacrifice, and not on the ground of his own actions? 13. And should the victim killed in sacrifice really go to heaven, should we not expect the Brahmanas to offer themselves to be immolated in sacrifice? A similar practice, however, is nowhere seen amongst them. Who then may take to heart the advice proffered by these counselors? 14. As to the celestials, should we believe that they, who are wont to enjoy the fair ambrosia of incomparable scent, flavor, magnificence and effective power, served to them by the beautiful Apsaras, would abandon it to delight in the slaughter of a pitiable victim, that they might feast on the omentum and such other parts of his body as are offered to them in sacrifice? Therefore, it is the proper time to act so and so. Having thus made up his mind, the king feigned to be eager to undertake the sacrifice, and in approval of their words, he spoke to them in this manner: Verily, well protected am I, well gratified, having such counselors as your lordship are, thus bent on securing my happiness. Therefore, I will have a human sacrifice of 1,000 victims performed. Let my officials, each in his sphere of business, be ordered to bring together the requisites necessary for that purpose. Let also an inquiry be made of the most fitting ground whereon to raise the tents and other buildings for the Satara. Further, the proper time for the sacrifice must be fixed by the astrologers, examining auspicious lunar days, karanas, muhurtas, and constellations. The Purohita answered, In order to succeed in your enterprise, your Majesty ought to take the Avavbhrita, final bait, at the end of one sacrifice, after which you may successively undertake the others. For if, to be sure, would blame you and be stirred up to great agitation on their account. These words of the Purohita having been approved by the other Brahmins, the king replied, Do not apprehend the wrath of the people. Reverence, I shall take such measures as to prevent any agitation among my subjects. After this, the king convoked an assembly of the townsmen and the landsmen, and said, inverted commas open, I intend to perform a human sacrifice of 1,000 victims, but nobody behaving honestly is fit to be designated for immolation on my part. With this in mind, I give you this advice. Whomsoever of you I shall henceforward perceive transgressing the boundaries of moral conduct, despising my royal will, him I order to be caught, to be victim at my sacrifice, thinking such a one the stain of his family and a danger to my country. With the object of carrying this resolution into effect, I shall cause you to be observed by faultless and sharp-sighted emissaries who have shaken off sleepy carelessness and will report to me concerning your conduct. Then the foremost of the assembly, folding their hands and bringing them to their foreheads, spoke. 15:16. Your Majesty, all your actions tend to the happiness of your subjects. What reason can there be to despise you on that account? Even God, Brahma, cannot but sanction your behavior. Your Majesty, who is the authority of the virtuous, be our highest authority. For this reason anything which pleases your Majesty must please us too. Indeed, you are pleased with nothing else but our enjoyment and our good. After then, notables, both of the town and the country, had accepted his command in this manner. The king dispersed about his towns and all over his country officers notified as such by their outward appearance to the people, with the charge of laying hold of the evildoers, and everywhere he ordered proclamations to be made by beat of drum day after day of this kind. 17. The king, a granter of security as he is, warrants safety to everyone who constantly cultivates honesty and good conduct, in short, to the virtuous, yet intending to perform a human sacrifice for the benefit of his subjects, he wants human victims by thousands to be taken out of those who delight in misconduct. 18. Therefore, whosoever henceforward licentiously indulging in misbehavior shall disregard the command of our monarch, which is even observed by the kings, his vassals, should be brought to the state as a sacrificial victim by the very force of his own actions, and people shall witness his miserable suffering, when he shall pine with pain, his body being fastened to the sacrificial post. When the inhabitants of that realms became aware of the king's careful search after evildoers, with the aim of destining them to be victims at his sacrifice, for they heard the most frightful royal proclamation day after day, and saw the king's servants, who were appointed to look out for wicked people and to seize them, appearing every now and then everywhere, they abandoned their attachment to bad conduct and grew intent on strictly observing the moral precepts and self-control. They avoided every occasion of hatred and enmity, and settling their quarrels and differences, cherished mutual love and mutual esteem, obedience to the words of parents and teachers, a general spirit of liberty and sharing with others, hospitality, good manners, modesty prevailed among them. In short, they lived, as it were, in the Krita Yuga. 19. The fear of death had awakened in them thoughts of the next world. The risk of tarnishing the honor of their families had stirred their care of guarding their reputation. The great purity of their hearts had strengthened their sense of shame. These factors being at work, people were soon distinguished by their spotless behavior. Even though everyone became more than ever intent on keeping a righteous conduct, still the king's servants did not diminish their watchfulness in the pursuit of evildoers. This also contributed to prevent people from falling short of righteousness. The king, learning from his emissaries the state of things in his realm, felt extremely rejoiced. He bestowed rich presents on those messengers as a reward for the good news they told him, and enjoined his ministers, speaking something like this: "The protection of my subjects is my highest desire. You know, now they have become worthy of the recipients of sacrificial gifts, and it is for the purpose of my sacrifice that I have provided this wealth. Well, I intend to accomplish my sacrifice in the manner which I have considered to be the proper ones. Let everyone who wishes for money, that it may be fuel for his happiness, come and accept it from my hand to his heart's content. In this way, the distress and poverty which is vexing our country may be soon driven out. Indeed, whenever I consider my own strong determination to protect my subjects and the great assistance I derive from you, my excellent companions in that task, it often seems to me as though those sufferings of my people, by exciting my anger, were burning in my mind like a blazing fire." The ministers accepted the royal command, and anon When to execute it, they ordered alms hall to be established in all villages, towns, markets, likewise at all stations on the roads. This being done, they caused all who begged in order to satisfy their wants to be provided day after day with a gift of those objects just has been ordered by the king. So poverty disappeared, and the people, having received wealth from the part of the king, dressed and adorned with manifold and fine garments and ornaments, exhibited the splendor of festival days. The glory of the king, magnified by the eulogies of the rejoiced recipients of his gift, spread in all directions in the same way, as the flower dust of the lotuses, carried forth by small waves of a lake, extend itself over a larger and larger surface. And after the whole people, in consequence of the wise measures taken by the ruler, had become intent on virtuous behavior, the plagues and calamities, overpowered by growth of all such qualities as conduced to prosperity, faded away, having lost their hold. The seasons succeeded each other in due course, rejoicing everybody by their regularity, and like kings newly established, complying with the lawful order of things. Consequently, the earth produced the various kinds of corn in abundance, and there was fullness of pure and blue water and lotuses in all water basins. No epidemics afflicted mankind. The medicinal herbs possessed their efficacious virtues more than ever. Monsoons blew in due time and regularly. The planets moved along in auspicious paths. Nowhere there existed any danger to be feared, either from abroad or from within, or such as might be caused by dangerous derangements of the elements. Continuing in righteousness and self-control, cultivating good behavior and modesty, the people of that country enjoyed, as it were, the prerogatives of the Krita Yuga. By the power, then, of the king performing his sacrifice in this manner, in accordance with the precepts of the law, the sufferings of the indigent were put to an end together with plagues and calamities, and the country abounded in a prosperous and thriving population, offering the pleasant aspect of felicity. Accordingly, people never wearied of repeating benedictions on the king and extending his renown in all directions. One day, one of the highest royal officials, whose heart had been inclined to the true belief, spoke thus to the king, inverted commas open, "This is a true saying. In truth, monarchs, because they always deal with all kinds of business, the highest, the lowest, and the intermediate, by far surpass in the wisdom any wise men. For your majesty, you have obtained the happiness of your subjects, both in this world and in the next, as the effect of your sacrifice being performed in righteousness, free from the blamable sin of animal slaughter. The hard times are all over, and the sufferings of poverty have ceased. Since men have been established in the precepts of good conduct, why use many words? Your subjects are happy. The black antelope skin, which covers your limbs, has the resemblance of the spot on the bright moon's surface, nor can the natural loveliness of your denouement be hindered by the restraint imposed on you by your being a dikshata. Your head, adorned with such hairdress as in compliance with the rites of diksha, possesses no less lustre than when it was embellished with the splendor of the royal umbrella. And, last not least, by your largeness you have surpassed the renown and abated the pride of famous performer of 100 sacrifices. As a rule, O you wise ruler, the sacrifice of those who long for the attainment of some good is a vile act, accompanied as it by injury doing to living beings. Your sacrifice, on the contrary, this monument of your glory, is in complete accordance with your lovely behavior and your aversion to vices. Oh, happy are the subjects who have their protector in you. It is certain that no father could be a better guardian to his children. Another said, if the wealthy practice charity, they are commonly impelled to do so by the hopes they put in the cultivation of that virtue. Good conduct, too, may be accounted for by the wish to obtain high regard among men or the desire of reaching heaven after death. But such a practice of both, as is seen in your skill in securing the benefit of others, cannot be found but in those who are accomplished both in learning and in virtuous exertions. Inverted commas close. In such a way, then, whose hearts are pure to do not act up to the enticement of the wicked. Knowing this, pure-heartedness is to be striven after. In spiritual lessons for princes, also, this is to be said, inverted commas open, who to his subjects wishing good, himself exerts, thus brings about salvation, glory, happiness. No other should be of a king the business. Inverted commas close. And it be added as follows: the prince who thrives after moral prosperity ought to act in accordance with the precepts of religion, thinking a religious conduct of his subjects to be the source of prosperity. Further, this is here to be said, inverted commas open, injuring animals never turns to bliss, but charity, self-restraint, continence, and the like have this power. For this reason, he who longs for bliss must devote himself to these virtues. And also, when discoursing on the Tathagata, in this manner, the Lord showed his inclination to care for interest of the world, when he was still in his previous existence. 4. Another powerful attack against Yadna is contained in his discourses known as Kutadanta Stuta. It is as follows: the wrong sacrifice and the right. 1. Thus have I heard the Blessed One once, when going on a tour through Magadha with a great multitude of the brethren, with about 500 brethren, came to a Brahman village in Magadha called Khanumata. And there at Khanumata he lodged in the Ambalathika pleasance. Now at that time the Brahman Kutadanta was dwelling at Khanumata, a place teeming with life and with much grassland and woodland and water and corn, on a royal domain presented him by Senia Bimim Bimbisara, the king of Magadha, as a royal gift, with power over it as if he were the king. And just then a great sacrifice was being got ready on behalf of Kutadanta the Brahmin, and 100 bulls and 100 steers, and 100 heifers and 100 goats, and 100 rams had been brought to the post for the sacrifice. Now the Brahmins and householders of Khanumata heard the news of the arrival of the Samana Gautama, and they began to leave Khanumata in companies and in bonds to go to the Ambalthika pleasance. And just then Kutandanta the Brahmin had gone apart to the upper terrace of his house for his siesta, and seeing the people thus to go by, he asked his doorkeeper the reason, and the doorkeeper told him. Then Kutandanta thought, I have heard that the Samana Gautama understands about the successful performance of a sacrifice with its threefold method and its 16 accessory instruments. Now I don't know all this, and yet I want to carry out a sacrifice. It would be well for me to go to Samana Gautama and ask him about it. So he sent his doorkeeper to the Brahmins and householders of Khanumata to ask them to wait till he could go with them to call upon the Blessed One. But there were at that time a number of Brahmins staying at Khanumata to take part in the great sacrifice. And when they heard this, they went to Kutandanta and persuaded him on the same grounds as the Brahmins had laid before Sonadanda not to go. But he answered them in the same terms that Sonadanda had used to those Brahmins. Then they were satisfied and went with him to call upon the Blessed One. And when he was seated there, Kutandanta the Brahmin told the Blessed One what he had heard, and requested him to tell him about the success in performing a sacrifice in its 3 modes, with its accessory articles of furniture of 16 kinds. Inverted commas open. Well then, O Brahmin, give ear and listen attentively, and I will speak. Very well, sir, said Kutandanta in reply, and the Blessed One spoke as follows. Inverted commas open. Long ago, O Brahmin, there was a king by name Vaidrilim, Mahaviga, mighty with great wealth and large property, with stores of silver and gold, of aids to enjoyment, of goods and corn, with his treasure houses and his garners full. Now when King Vaidrilim was once sitting alone in meditation, he became anxious at the thought, I have in abundance all the good things a mortal can enjoy. The whole wide circle of the earth is mine by conquest to possess. There, well, if I were to offer a great sacrifice, that should ensure me well and welfare for many days. And he had the Brahmin his chaplain called, and telling him all that he had thought, he said, "Be I would fain, O Brahmin, offer a great sacrifice. Let the venerable one instruct me how for my weal and my welfare for many days." Thereupon Brahman, who was chaplain, said to the king, "The king's country, sirs, is harassed and harried. There are dacoits abroad who pillage the villages and townships, and who make the roads unsafe. Were the king, so long as that is so, to levy a fresh tax, verily his majesty would be acting wrongly. But perchance his majesty might think, I'll soon put a stop to these scoundrels, game by degradation and banishment, and fines and bonds and death. But their license cannot be satisfactorily put a stop to. The remnant left unpunished would still go on harassing the realm. Now there is one method to adopt to put a thorough end to this disorder. Whosoever there be in the king's realm, who devote themselves to keeping cattle and the farm, to them let his majesty the king give food and seed corn. Whosoever there be in the king's realm, who devote themselves to trade, to them let his majesty the king give capital. Whosoever there be in the king's realm, who devote themselves to government service, to them let his majesty the king give wages and food. Then those men, following each his own business, will no longer harass the realm. The king's revenue will go up, the country will be quiet and at peace, and the populace, pleased one with another and happy, dancing their children in their arms, will dwell with open doors." Then King White Realm, O Brahman, accepted the word of his chaplain, and did as he said. And those men, following each his business, harassed the realm no more, and the king's revenue went up, and the country became quiet and at peace, and the populace, pleased one with another, and happy, dancing their children in their arms, dwelt with open doors. So King White Realm had his chaplain called and said, inverted commas open, "The disorder is at an end. The country is at peace. I want to offer that great sacrifice. Let the venerable one instruct me how, for my weal and my welfare for many days." Inverted commas close. Then let his majesty the king send invitations to whomsoever there may be in his realm who are Kshatriyas, vassals of his, either in the country or the towns, or who are ministers and officials of his, either in the country or towns, or who are the Brahmins of position, either in the country or the towns, or who are the householders of substance, either in the country or the towns, saying, inverted commas open, "I intend to offer a great sacrifice. Let the venerable ones give their sanction to what will be to me for weal and welfare for many days." Inverted commas close. Then King White Realm, O Brahman, accepted the word of his chaplain, and did as he said. And they each, Kshatriyas and ministers, and Brahmins and householders, made a like reply. Inverted commas open. Let his majesty the king celebrate the sacrifice. The time is suitable, O king. Inverted commas close. Thus did these four, as colleagues by consent, became wherewithal to furnish forth that sacrifice. King White Realm was gifted in the following 8 ways. He was well born on both sides, on the mother's side and on the father's, of pure descent, back through 7 generations, and no slur was cast upon him, and no reproach in respect of birth. He was handsome, pleasant in appearance, inspiring trust, gifted with great beauty of complexion, fair in color, fine in presence, stately to behold. He was mighty, with great wealth and large property, with stores of silver and gold, of aids to enjoyment, of goods and corns, with his treasure houses and his garners full. He was powerful in command of an army, loyal and disciplined in 4 divisions, of elephants, cavalry, chariots and bowmen, burning up, methinks, his enemies by his very glory. He was a believer and generous, a noble giver, keeping open house, a well and spring, when Samanas and Brahmins, the poor and the wayfarers, beggars and petitioners might draw, a doer of good deeds. He was learned in all kinds of knowledge. He knew the meaning of what had been said and could explain, inverted commas open, this saying has such and such a meaning, and that such and such, inverted commas close. He was intelligent, expert and wise, and able to think out things present or past or future. And these 8 gifts of his, too, became wherewithal to furnish forth that sacrifice. The Brahmin, his chaplain, was gifted in the following 4 ways. He was well born on both sides, on the mother's and on the father's, of pure descent back through 7 generations, with no slur cast upon him and no reproach with respect to birth. He was a student repeater who knew the mystic verses by heart, master of 3 Vedas with indices, the ritual, the phonology, and the exegesis as a 4th, and the legends as a 5th, learned in the idioms and the grammar, versed in loyakta, mature law, and in the 30 marks on the body of a great man. He was virtuous, established in virtue, gifted with virtue that had grown great. He was intelligent, expert, and wise, foremost, or at most the second among those who hold out the ladle. Thus these 4 gifts of his, too, became wherewithal to furnish forth that sacrifice. And further, O Brahman, the chaplain, before the sacrifice had begun, explained the king wide realm, the 3 modes. Should His Majesty the King, before starting on the great sacrifice, feel any such regret as, inverted commas open, great alas will be the portion of my wealth used up herein, inverted commas close, let not the king harbour such regret. Should His Majesty the King, whilst he is offering the great sacrifice, feel any such regret as, inverted commas open, great alas will be the portion of my wealth used up herein, let not the king harbour with such regret. Should His Majesty the King, when the great sacrifice has been offered, feel any such regret as, great alas will be the portion of my wealth used up herein, let not the king harbour such regret. Thus did the chaplain, O Brahmin, before the sacrifice had begun, explain the king wide realm, the 3 modes. And further, O Brahmin, the chaplain before the sacrifice had begun, in order to prevent any compunction that might afterwards, in 10 ways, arise as regards those who had taken part therein, said, inverted commas open, now there will come to your sacrifice, sire, men who destroy the life of living things, and men who refrain therefrom, men who take what has not been given, and men who refrain therefrom, men who speak lies, and men who do not, men who slander, and men who do not, men who speak rudely, and men who do not, men who chatter vain things, and men who refrain therefrom, men who covet, and men who covet not, men who harbour ill will, and men who harbour it not, men whose views are wrong, and men whose views are right. Of each of these let them, O do evil, alone with their evil. For them who do well, let your Majesty offer them. Sire, arrange the rites. For them let the king gratify. In them shall our heart within find peace. Inverted commas, close. And further, O Brahmin, the chaplain, whilst the king was carrying out the sacrifice, instructed and aroused and incited and gladdened his heart in 16 ways, inverted commas open, should there be people who should say of the king, as he is offering the sacrifice, King White Relim is celebrating sacrifice without having invited the 4 classes of his subjects, without himself having the 8 personal gifts, without assistance of a Brahmin who has 4 personal gifts. Then would they speak not according to the fact, for the consent of the 4 classes had been obtained. The king had the 8, and his Brahmin has the 4 personal gifts. With regard to each and every one of these 16 conditions, the king may rest, assured that it has been fulfilled. He can sacrifice and be glad, and possesses his heart in peace. Inverted commas, close. And further, O Brahmin, at that sacrifice, neither were any oxen slain, neither goats, nor fowls, nor fatted pigs, nor were any kinds of living creatures put to death. No trees were cut down to be used as pots, no dhaba grasses mown to strew around the sacrificial spot. And the slaves and messengers and workmen there employed were driven neither by rods nor fare, nor carried on their work, weeping with tears upon their faces. Whoso chose to help, he worked. Whoso chose not to help, worked not. What each chose to do, he did. What they chose not to do, that was left undone. With ghee and oil, butter and milk, and honey and sugar, only was that sacrifice accomplished. And further, O Brahmin, the Kshatriya vassals, and the ministers and officials, the Brahmins of positions, and the householders of substance, whether of the country or of the towns, went to King Wide Relim, taking with them much wealth, and said, inverted commas open, this abundant wealth, sire, have we brought hither for the king's use. Let his majesty accept it our hands. Sufficient wealth have I, my friends, laid up the produce of taxation that is just. Do you keep yours and take away more with you. Inverted commas close. When they had thus been refused by king, they went aside and considered, thus one with the other. Inverted commas open. It would not beseem us now, were we to take this wealth away again to our own homes. King Vaijalim is offering a great sacrifice. Let us too make an after sacrifice. Inverted commas close. So the Kshatriyas established a continual largesses to the east of the king's sacrificial pit, and the officials to the south thereof, and the Brahmins to the west thereof, and the householders to the north thereof. And the things given, and the manner of their gift, was in all respects like unto the great sacrifice of King Vaijalim himself. Thus, O Brahmin, there was a fourfold cooperation, and King Vaijalim was gifted with 8 personal gifts, his officiating Brahmin with 4. And there, with 3 modes of the giving that sacrifice, this, O Brahmin, is what is called the due celebration of a sacrifice in its threefold mode, and with its furniture of 16 kinds. And when he had thus spoken, those Brahmins lifted up their voices in tumult, and said, inverted commas open, how glorious the sacrifice, how pure its accomplishment. Inverted commas close. But Kutadanta, the Brahmin, sat there in silence. Then those Brahmins said to Kutadanta, why do you not approve the good word of the Samana Gautama as well said? I do not fail to approve, for he who approves not, as well said, that which has been well spoken by the Samana Gautama, verily his head would split in twain. But I was considering that the Samana Gautama does not say, inverted commas open, thus have I heard, nor thus behoves it to be, but says only, thus it was then, or it was like that then. So I thought, for a certainty, the Samana Gautama himself must at that time have been King Vaijalim, or the Brahmin who officiated for him at that sacrifice. Does the venerable Gautama admit that he who celebrates such a sacrifice or causes it to be celebrated is reborn at the dissolution of the body after death into some state of happiness in heaven? Inverted commas close. Yes, O Brahmana, that I admit. At that time I was the Brahmin who, as chaplain, had had that sacrifice performed. Is there, O Gautama, any other sacrifice less difficult and less troublesome, with more fruit and more advantage still than this? Yes, O Brahmana, there is. And what, O Gautama, may that be? The perpetual gifts kept up in a family, where there are given specifically to virtuous recluses. But what is the reason, O Gautama, and what the cause? Why such perpetual giving specifically to virtuous recluses, and kept up in a family, are less difficult and troublesome of greater fruit and greater advantage than that other sacrifices with its 3 modes and its accessories of 16 kinds? To the latter sort of sacrifice, O Brahmin, neither will the Aratha go, nor such as have entered on the Arath way. And why not? Because in it, beating with sticks takes place, and seizing by the throat. But they will go to the former, where such things are not, and therefore are such perpetual gifts above the other sort of sacrifice. And is there, O Gautama, any other sacrifice less difficult and less troublesome, of greater fruit and of greater advantage than either of these? Yes, O Brahmana, there is. And what, O Gautama, may that be? The putting up of dwelling place, vihara, on behalf of the order, in all the 4 directions. And is there, O Gautama, any other sacrifice, less difficult and less troublesome, of greater fruit and of greater advantage, than each and all of these 3? Yes, O Brahmana, there is. And what, O Gautama, may that be? He who with trusting heart takes up Buddha as his guide, and the truth and the order, that is a sacrifice better than open largesses, better than perpetual alms, better than the gift of a dwelling place. And is there, O Gautama, any other sacrifice, less difficult and less troublesome, of greater fruit and of greater advantage than all these 4? When a man with trusting heart takes upon himself the percept abstinence from destroying life, abstinence from taking what has not been given, abstinence from evil conduct in respect of lust, abstinence from lying words, abstinence from strong, intoxicating, maddening drinks, the root of carelessness, that is a sacrifice better than open largesses, better than perpetual alms, better than the gift of dwelling places, better than accepting guidance. And is there, O Gautama, any other sacrifice less difficult, less troublesome, of greater fruit and greater advantage than all these 5? Yes, O Brahmana, there is. And what, O Gautama, may that be? The answer to the long passage from the Samana Fail Sutta 40, page 62 of the text, down to 75, page 74, on the first ghana, as follows. 1. The introductory paragraphs on the appearance of a Buddha, his preaching, the conversion of a hearer, and his renunciation of the world. 2nd, the Silas, minor morality. 3rd, the paragraph on confidence. 4. The paragraph on guarded in the door of his senses. 5. The paragraph on mindful and self-possessed. 6. The paragraph on content. 7. The paragraph on solitude. 8. The paragraph on 5 hindrances. 9. The description of first ghana. This, O Brahmin, is a sacrifice less difficult, less troublesome, of greater fruit and greater advantage than the previous sacrifices. The same is then said, the 2nd, 3rd and 4th ghanas in succession, as the Samano Fallo Stutas 7782, and of the insight arising from knowledge, Ibid 8384, and further, omitting direction mentioned either way of 8596 inclusive, of the knowledge of the destruction of the asavas, the deadly intoxications of floods, Ibid 9798. And there is no sacrifice man can celebrate, O Brahmin, higher and sweeter than this. And when he had thus spoken, Kutadanta, the Brahmin, said to the Blessed One, Most excellent, O Gautama, are the words of thy mouth, most excellent, just as if a man were to set up what has been thrown down, or were to reveal that which has been hidden away, or were to point out the right road to him who has gone astray, or were to bring a light into the darkness so that those who had eyes could see external forms. Just even so has the truth been made known to me in many a figure by Venerable Gautama. I, even I, betake myself to the Venerable Gautama as my guide to the doctrine and the order. May the Venerable One accept me as a disciple, as one who, from this day forth, as long as life endures, has taken him as his guide. And I myself, O Gautama, will have the 700 bulls, and the 700 steers, and the 700 heifers, and the 700 goats, and the 700 rams set free. To them I grant their life. Let them eat green grass, drink fresh water, and may cool breezes waft around them. Then the Blessed One discoursed to Kutadanta the Brahmin in due order. This is to say, he spake to him of generosity, of right conduct of heaven, of the danger, the vanity, and the defilement of lust, of the advantages of renunciation. And when the Blessed One became aware that Kutadanta the Brahmin had become prepared, softened, prejudiced, upraised, and believing in heart, then did he proclaim the doctrine the Buddhas alone have won. That is to say, the doctrine of sorrow, of its origin, of its cessation, and of the path. And just as a clean cloth, with all stains in it washed away, will readily take the dye, just even so did Kotadanta the Brahmin, even while seated there, obtain the pure and spotless eye for the truth. And he knew whatsoever has a beginning, in that is inherent also the necessity of dissolution. And then the Brahman Kotadanta, as one who had seen the truth, had mastered it, understood it, dived deep down into it, who had passed beyond doubt and put away perplexity and gained full confidence, who had become dependent on no other for his knowledge of the teaching of the Master, addressed the Blessed One and said, "May the Venerable Gautama grant me the favor of taking his tomorrow meal with me, and also the members of the order with him." And the Blessed One signified by silence his consent. Then the Brahman Kotadanta, seeing that the Blessed One had accepted, rose from his seat, and keeping his right towards him as he passed, he departed thence. And at the daybreak he had sweet food, both hard and soft, made ready at the pit prepared for his sacrifice, and had the time announced to the Blessed One. "It is time, O Gautama, the meal is ready." And the Blessed One, who had dressed early in the morning, put on his outer robe, taking his bowl with him, went with the brethren to the Kotadanta sacrificial pit, and sat down there on the seat prepared for him. And Kotadanta the Brahmin satisfied the brethren with the Buddha at their head, with his own hand, with sweet food, both hard and soft, till they refused any more. And when the Blessed One had finished his meal and cleansed his bowl and his hands, Kotadanta the Brahmin took a low seat and seated himself beside him. And when he was thus seated, the Blessed One, instructed and aroused, and incited, gladdened Kotadanta the Brahmin with religious discourse, and then arose from his seat and departed thence. Kotadanta's Stuta is ended.